A senator's wife, drunk behind the wheel. A hit and run that left a decorated war veteran stranded. And then, in the middle of her court hearing, she pulls out her cell phone and dials her husband Liv, expecting salvation. What happened next didn't just shock the courtroom. It shattered a marriage, destroyed a carefully constructed life, and proved that some phone calls you can't take back. This is the story of Diana Crawford, a woman who thought her last name was a shield, and Judge Frank Caprio, the man who taught her it wasn't. Buckle up, because what unfolds in this Providence courtroom will restore your faith that power doesn't purchase immunity, and that sometimes the people closest to us refuse to be our escape route. 9 days before Diana Crawford walked into that courtroom, security cameras captured something devastating. Wednesday night, 9:47 p.m., a Providence shopping center parking lot bathed in fluorescent light. Diana Crawford, 45 years old, wife of Rhode Island State Senator Michael Crawford, climbed into her Mercedes SUV after what witnesses would later describe as an evening of heavy drinking. She never should have gotten behind that wheel. The Mercedes rolled through the parking lot, Diana's hands loose on the steering wheel, her vision compromised, her judgment obliterated by a blood alcohol content that would later measure 14, nearly twice the legal limit. And then impact. Her SUV slammed into a parked 2015 Honda Accord with enough force to trigger the car's alarm system and deploy rear collision sensors. The sound ripped through the quiet parking lot. Metal crunched, glass shattered. The Honda's rear quarter panel crumpled like paper. Diana stumbled out of her Mercedes. Security footage shows her standing there, unsteady on her feet, inspecting the damage she'd caused. 30 full seconds. Half a minute to do the right thing, to leave a note, to call the police, to check if anyone was hurt. She did none of those things. Instead, Diana Crawford returned to her vehicle and drove away, leaving destruction in her wake and no information behind. But that Honda didn't belong to just anyone. It belonged to Robert Martinez, a 67-year-old Vietnam War veteran who was inside the adjacent pharmacy at that exact moment, picking up medication for his wife, a woman battling multiple sclerosis, confined to a wheelchair, dependent on her husband for everything. When Robert returned to his car, he found devastation, significant damage. No note, no apology, no explanation, just a repair estimate that would soon reach $4,300 and a $1,000 insurance deductible that his fixed veteran's income could barely absorb. His wife's wheelchair-accessible van was already in the shop. The Honda was their lifeline, and Diana Crawford had just severed it without a second thought. But someone had been watching. A witness captured Diana's license plate. 40 minutes later, police arrived at the Crawford residence, an upscale home in one of Providence's most prestigious neighborhoods. They found Diana inside, still intoxicated, still unrepentant. Her first words to the officers, not an apology, not an explanation. "Do you know who my husband is?" 9 days later, Providence Municipal Court, Judge Frank Caprio presiding. Diana Crawford entered the courtroom like royalty attending an inconvenient appointment. Designer outfit, expensive accessories, an expression that suggested this was all a terrible misunderstanding that would evaporate as soon as the right people understood who she was. Beside her walked Thomas Whitmore, attorney from one of Providence's most politically connected law firms, carrying a briefcase and an air of absolute confidence that money and influence could make criminal charges disappear like morning fog. They were both about to learn otherwise. The bailiff called the case. Judge Caprio's voice cut through the courtroom, calm but authoritative, ensuring every word entered the public record. Driving under the influence causing property damage. Leaving the scene of an accident. Failure to render aid to determine if anyone was injured. Whitmore immediately requested a sidebar, a private conversation to discuss sensitive matters given Mrs. Crawford's position in the community. Judge Caprio's response was immediate and devastating. "Mr. Whitmore, this is a public courtroom. All proceedings stay on the record. If your client's conduct can't survive public scrutiny, that's a problem with the conduct, not with public scrutiny." Whitmore pivoted, acknowledging his client's error in judgment, while emphasizing her clean record, her family's civic involvement, Senator Crawford's legislative achievements benefiting countless Rhode Island constituents. Judge Caprio interrupted like a scalpel cutting through pretense. "Mr. Whitmore, your client's husband's legislative record is not evidence in this case. We're here to address what she did, not who she's married to." The temperature in the courtroom dropped 10 degrees. Judge Caprio turned his attention to Diana directly. "Do you understand the charges against you?" Diana nodded, but her expression betrayed her. She viewed this as a formality, a procedural hurdle before returning to her comfortable life. "Yes, Your Honor, but I think there's been some exaggeration about what actually happened." Exaggeration. That single word hung in the air, like a confession of delusion. Judge Caprio picked up the police report, his voice hardening. "Mrs. Crawford, you struck a parked vehicle while driving with a blood alcohol content of 14. You left the scene without providing information. These are facts, not exaggerations." Diana shifted uncomfortably, searching for justification. "The damage wasn't that serious, and I thought the parking lot was private property, so I didn't realize I needed to report it." Judge Caprio's expression could have frozen lava. "Mrs. Crawford, hit-and-run laws apply to all property, public or private, and whether damage is serious isn't determined by the person who caused it." Then, he did something that shattered Diana's carefully constructed narrative. "Clerk, play the security camera footage." The courtroom monitor flickered to life, and there it was, undeniable, damning, impossible to explain away. Diana's Mercedes striking Robert Martinez's Honda. The violent impact, the alarm activating. Diana exiting her vehicle, inspecting the damage for nearly 30 seconds, long enough to understand exactly what she'd done, then returning to her Mercedes and driving away. No note, no call to police, no concern for anyone but herself. Judge Caprio's voice cut through the silence. "Mrs. Crawford, do you recognize what's shown in this video?" "Yes, but I was in shock. I wasn't thinking clearly." "Mrs. Crawford, the footage shows you standing there for 30 seconds examining the damage. That's long enough to leave a note, long enough to call police, long enough to do the right thing." Diana had no response. Then Judge Caprio read something that transformed the case from property damage to profound human impact. Robert Martinez's victim impact statement. The elderly veteran described returning to his car to find devastation. No information, no explanation. He detailed his $1,000 insurance deductible, a crushing burden on a fixed veteran's income. He explained that his wife's wheelchair-accessible van was in the shop, making the Honda their only transportation to her critical medical appointments. Diana's drunk driving hadn't just damaged property, it had inflicted financial hardship and logistical nightmare on an elderly couple already navigating a progressive disability. Judge Caprio looked at Diana with an expression of profound disappointment. "Mrs. Crawford, have you attempted to contact Mr. Martinez, to apologize, to offer to cover the damages?" Whitmore jumped in, explaining that legal counsel advised against direct contact. Judge Caprio's voice became a blade. "Legal strategy doesn't excuse moral obligation, Mr. Whitmore. Your client fled the scene, and in 9 days, she hasn't taken any responsibility for the harm she caused." Diana finally spoke, her voice taking on an edge of frustration rather than remorse. "Your Honor, I understand I made a mistake. My family is prepared to pay for the damages. We just want to resolve this matter quietly and move forward. Quietly." That single word revealed everything. Mrs. Crawford, Judge Caprio's voice was ice. You want to resolve this quietly because your husband is a state senator. But the Martinez family can't resolve their financial hardship quietly. They have to live with the consequences of your choices publicly, every day. Diana's jaw tightened. For the first time, she looked genuinely frustrated, rather than merely inconvenienced. Angry that this wasn't proceeding according to her expectations. Judge Caprio called Officer Jennifer Santos to the stand. The officer, who responded to the scene and later arrested Diana at her residence. Officer Santos, what was Mrs. Crawford's demeanor during the arrest? Dismissive, Your Honor. She repeatedly asked if we knew who her husband was. She said this was a waste of police resources, and that we should be focusing on real crimes. Judge Caprio requested the body camera audio. And then Diana's voice filled the courtroom, slurred, indignant, entitled, "Do you know who my husband is? He's a state senator. You're making a huge mistake. This will be taken care of." The silence that followed was absolutely devastating. Judge Caprio looked at Diana like she was a specimen under a microscope. Mrs. Crawford, that audio was recorded at 10:32 p.m., 45 minutes after you struck Mr. Martinez's vehicle and drove away. Instead of taking responsibility, you threatened police officers with your husband's position. Diana tried to backpedal. I was stressed. I said things I didn't mean. You said exactly what you meant, Mrs. Crawford. You expected your husband's position to make your criminal behavior disappear. And that's when Diana Crawford made the decision that would become legendary in Rhode Island legal history. She pulled her cell phone from her purse. Right there, in open court during her hearing, facing criminal charges, and she started dialing. Judge Caprio's voice cut through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Mrs. Crawford, what are you doing? Diana held the phone to her ear, her voice taking on a tone of relief, as if salvation was just one phone call away. I'm calling my husband. He can explain this better than I can. The courtroom collectively stopped breathing. Did she just... Mrs. Crawford, put that phone away immediately. But Diana continued, phone pressed to her ear, her expression suggesting she believed this would all be resolved in moments. He's the one who deals with legal matters. He'll know what to say. Judge Caprio's voice became absolute zero. Mrs. Crawford, you are standing in my courtroom facing criminal charges, and you just attempted to call your husband for help in the middle of proceedings. That is contempt of court. Diana finally lowered the phone, but the damage was catastrophic. She had just demonstrated, in front of an entire courtroom, on the record, undeniably, that she believed her husband's political position could fix anything, even active judicial proceedings. Judge Caprio made a decision that would be talked about for years. Bailiff retrieved Mrs. Crawford's phone. Diana's face went pale. Mrs. Crawford, you called your husband. I'm going to give you exactly what you wanted. We're going to talk to Senator Crawford right now, in front of everyone. This wasn't what Diana expected, not remotely. Within minutes, the clerk had Senator Michael Crawford on the line. Judge Caprio put the call on speakerphone so the entire courtroom could hear. Senator Crawford, this is Judge Frank Caprio in Providence Municipal Court. Your wife is here for a hearing regarding DUI charges, and she just attempted to call you in the middle of proceedings for assistance. I'm putting you on speaker so we can address this matter publicly. A pause. Then, Senator Crawford's voice filled the courtroom, steady, heavy with emotion, and absolutely devastating to Diana's expectations. Your Honor, I apologize for my wife's behavior. She had no right to call me during court proceedings. Diana tried to interrupt, but Judge Caprio held up his hand. Senator Crawford continued, and what he said next made Diana physically stagger. Your Honor, I need to say something for the record. I've been aware of the charges against my wife since the night of her arrest. I've advised her to take full responsibility, to apologize to Mr. Martinez, and to accept whatever consequences the court deems appropriate." Diana's eyes widened. This wasn't rescue. This was abandonment. Judge Caprio asked the question everyone needed answered. "Senator Crawford, are you asking this court to show leniency to your wife because of your position?" The senator's response destroyed Diana's entire worldview. "No, Your Honor. I'm asking you to treat her exactly as you would treat any other defendant. Her actions were wrong. The fact that she's married to a state senator doesn't excuse drunk driving, property damage, or leaving an elderly veteran to deal with the consequences alone," Diana whispered, urgently, desperately. "Michael, what are you doing?" Senator Crawford heard her. "Diana, I told you to take responsibility. You chose not to listen. I've spent my career working on criminal justice reform, on accountability, on equal application of law. I can't advocate for those principles publicly and then ask for exemptions privately." Judge Caprio gave the senator an opportunity. "Senator, do you have anything else you'd like to say to this court?" Senator Crawford's voice became even more serious, more personal. "Yes, Your Honor. Robert Martinez is a Vietnam War veteran. My father served in Vietnam. The fact that my wife hit Mr. Martinez's car and drove away, leaving him to deal with the damage alone, is something I find deeply shameful. Mr. Martinez served this country. He deserves respect, not hit-and-run treatment from someone who then threatens police with her husband's political position." The courtroom was absolutely silent. You could hear hearts breaking. Diana was crying now. Not tears of remorse, but tears of shock and panic. The realization that her safety net had just disintegrated. "Your Honor, whatever sentence you determine is appropriate, you have my full support. My wife needs to learn that her last name doesn't grant her immunity from consequences. If this were any other defendant, I'd expect full accountability. I expect the same for her." Judge Caprio thanked the senator. The call ended. Diana stood alone at the defendant's table, completely exposed. The rescue she expected had transformed into the most public accountability imaginable. Judge Caprio's voice was calm but absolutely firm. "Mrs. Crawford, your husband, the man you tried to call for help in the middle of court proceedings, just told me to treat you like any other defendant. Let's do exactly that." He reviewed the evidence systematically, building a case that was airtight. Security footage proving she struck Mr. Martinez's vehicle. Body camera audio proving she threatened officers with her husband's position. Blood alcohol content of .14 proving significant intoxication. Her attempt to call her husband in court proving she still believed political connections could erase accountability. The sentence Judge Caprio delivered was comprehensive and devastating. For driving under the influence, $1,000 fine, mandatory alcohol education program, 1-year license suspension. For leaving the scene of an accident, additional $500 fine, and 80 hours of community service at a veterans support organization. For failure to render aid, additional $250 fine. For contempt of court for attempting to use her phone during proceedings, additional $500 fine. Total monetary penalties, $250. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. Diana would pay full restitution to Robert Martinez, $4,300 for vehicle repairs, plus his $1,000 deductible. Total restitution, $5,300. She would write formal letters of apology to Mr. Martinez and Officer Santos, both reviewed by the court before delivery. And perhaps most significantly, the consequence that would truly teach her. Diana would complete her 80 hours of community service, specifically assisting elderly veterans with transportation, driving them to medical appointments, helping them navigate VA services, the exact kind of assistance Robert Martinez needed when his car was damaged. Total financial impact, $7,550 plus attorney fees. Total consequence, 1 year without a license and a permanent record of contempt for trying to call her husband in court. Whitmore tried to object, calling the sentence excessive. Judge Caprio's response silenced him instantly. "Mr. Whitmore, your client drove drunk, caused significant property damage, fled the scene, threatened police officers, and then tried to call her husband in the middle of court proceedings. Every consequence she's facing is proportional to her choices." As Diana was processed out, she passed Robert Martinez, who had been sitting quietly in the gallery throughout the entire hearing. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't apologize, just walked past like he was invisible, like he'd always been invisible to her. But Robert Martinez stood and addressed Judge Caprio, his voice steady and dignified. "Your Honor, may I say something?" "Of course, Mr. Martinez." "I just want to thank you. I'm 67 years old. I served in Vietnam. I've never asked for special treatment, but I also didn't expect to be treated like I didn't matter. Mrs. Crawford hit my car and drove away like I was nobody. You just showed me that in your courtroom. I'm somebody. Thank you." Judge Caprio nodded, visibly moved. "Mr. Martinez, you've always been somebody. This court just made sure Mrs. Crawford learned that." Within hours, news of the hearing spread across Rhode Island like wildfire. The audio of Diana calling her husband in court became the talk of every news station. Senator Crawford's statement, supporting full accountability, trended on social media nationwide. 2 days later, Senator Michael Crawford held a press conference that shocked the political establishment. "My wife's behavior was unacceptable. Her refusal to take responsibility is unacceptable. I've spent my career fighting for accountability in our justice system. I can't maintain that integrity while staying married to someone who believes political connections should erase criminal behavior." The separation became a divorce within 6 months. Senator Crawford's approval ratings didn't plummet. They increased. Voters respected his integrity, his willingness to choose principles over personal comfort, justice over protection. Diana began her community service 3 weeks later, driving elderly veterans to medical appointments. Week 1. Silent, resentful, going through the motions. Week 5. Starting to listen to their stories, beginning to understand. Week 12. Genuinely engaged, asking about their service, understanding their sacrifices. And then something happened that changed everything. One veteran, Thomas Kim, told her about serving in Vietnam with a man named Martinez. Diana asked if it was Robert Martinez. It was. They had served together. Diana broke down. For the first time since the incident, she truly understood what she had done. She hadn't just hit a car. She had disrespected a man who served his country, who sacrificed for people like her, who deserved so much better. She completed her 80 hours. She wrote genuine apology letters that the court accepted. She finished her alcohol education program. And 6 months after her sentencing, she requested something extraordinary, a meeting with Robert Martinez. They met at a coffee shop. Diana looked at the man whose life she'd disrupted and spoke words she should have said 9 months earlier. "Mr. Martinez, I hit your car and drove away like you didn't matter. I threatened police with my husband's position. I tried to call him in court to fix it. I was wrong about all of it. I'm sorry." Robert listened. Then he said something that Diana would never forget. "Mrs. Crawford, I forgive you. But understand something. I didn't serve this country so people like you could have special privileges. I served so everyone could be equal under the law. Judge Caprio reminded you of that. Don't forget it again." 1 year after her sentencing, Diana had completed all requirements. Her license was reinstated. Her divorce was final. Her life looked completely different, and she continued volunteering at the Veterans Organization, even though her required hours were complete. Because Diana Crawford had learned something her political connections never taught her. Respect isn't inherited through marriage. It's earned through conduct. Diana Crawford walked into that courtroom thinking her husband's position would save her. She pulled out her cell phone in the middle of her hearing, expecting rescue. Instead, she heard her husband tell the judge to treat her like anyone else. That phone call, the one she thought would fix everything, became the moment that changed her life forever. This is what accountability looks like. This is what happens when judges refuse to bend, when senators choose integrity over protection, and when the law applies equally to everyone, regardless of who they're married to. This is the legacy of Judge Frank Caprio. This is justice.